Hello everyone. So it's been a while. Yeah, I've been preoccupied and busy since end of last year with other projects and just with family. We haven't been able to travel because our state of Western Australia has been in. It's not lockdown, but the borders have been closed, and I haven't even been able to see my family, my relatives in Singapore and Indonesia. Yeah, I've been very busy with some other projects. I made a film, a short film with a couple of friends. I'll put the link down below. I wouldn't say that it's not it's not nothing to do with theology, because everything has to do with theology. I think we should all know that by now. And there's a theology in everything, but it's just more about life in Western Australia. Anyway, yeah. So it's the first day of autumn, or what you guys in the States would call fall. It actually rained today, which is very surprising. I didn't expect it to rain. So I did my work, and I went out and I saw the rain. So I decided, wow, this is new. I haven't seen rain for a long time. I thought I'd walk a little bit in the rain. It felt pretty good, actually. To get a little bit soaked. A little bit of rain doesn't hurt anybody. Yeah, so situation wise, things are not getting better around the world. That we see restrictions, COVID-19 restrictions are being dropped, but in Western Australia, our border is opening in a couple of days' time to the other states. So you might find it surprising if you're watching from the States or any other country, that we've been locked in our own state for two years now, going on 3 years. We haven't been able to even travel to another state. Well, there were times when we were able to, but for the most part, we have not been able to basically leave our state. And so finally they said that the government said they're going to throw open the gates of the state on the 3rd of March. It's the 1st of March today. We'll see if that actually happens, because last time they said it was going to be I think it was 5th of February, I think, and it didn't happen because they changed their mind. Anyway, I'm not going to get too political on this particular channel. That's for another channel. Yeah, so we'll see how we go. And all in all, God is in control. God is still on the throne, and He listens to us. He hears our prayers, and He is supremely sovereign. I want to talk today a little bit about what's going on in the world. I guess there's the situation in Ukraine, which you have to understand. The situation in Ukraine is a little bit more complex, a lot more complex than what the mainstream media would probably been portraying it as. There's a lot of history, and unfortunately, just like with anything else, like the pandemic and the government response to COVID-19 and all that. The problem is that we have a society that are beset with two problems. First, our society, the people in our society, are very short-sighted when it comes to remembering the past. Right? So we're very bad at recognizing patterns that have come before. The current situation in Europe, in the Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, and now Belarus apparently has stepped in as well, is very reminiscent of the beginning of World War II, if you know your history. But you see a lot of people saying pray for Ukraine, and I absolutely pray for Ukraine, pray for the Ukrainian people. I've seen photos, and all that. Okay, I've seen the photos of the bombing and the suffering there, and we have to pray in any way possible. We should help them in a more material and financial or whatever, in a practical sense. But all this throwing up of hashtag pray for Ukraine, putting up the Ukrainian flag here and there everywhere, it doesn't help anything. Okay, praying helps. Saying that we should pray, as in throwing up a slogan as a form of virtue signaling, doesn't help. And the other thing is that we have been we've been lacking, critically lacking in critical thinking. We don't have the capacity of critical thinking anymore. So when you can't think anymore, when you have a society that can't think anymore, it's very, very easy to be easily swayed by emotions. Some time ago, some kind of number of years ago, of course, you got the Syrian crisis, and there's this picture of this boy who was lying face down. He died. Okay, he was a refugee. He was found. He was photographed lying facing down on the beach, and he was dead. And it's a very sad thing. Obviously, a very sad turn of events. It's a tragic death, very young, and he was from refugees. He was part of the refugee family. But most people don't know the story of that particular picture. It made me realize that a picture paints 1,000 words, but who actually writes the words? Is it the photographer? Is it the artist? Or is it the people who watch them? Or is it the other people the media who took that picture, or whatever picture it is, and then use them to portray something? Okay, so we are meant to be. God gave us a rational capacity, and we are meant to be a society in the West that has benefited greatly from the Enlightenment period in history, and we are supposed to be both spiritual and rational people. And now, unfortunately, we went through the period of modernism, where it's all about rational, and the world has basically stepped away from spirituality and from religion. It's a this is why we have a post-Christian world today, because we have the modernism, right? Modernism that prioritizes reason. So our society has stepped away from traditional religion and went into period where it's logic, or reason. But then come the postmodern era, where now there's a swing back, but it's a swing back into a kind of a spiritual sense, like a new age. New ageism is one of the things that came out of this. But it doesn't mean that people at our society, and our Western society especially, has returned to traditional Christianity or traditional religion, Judaism and Christianity. No, instead, we have gone and sought other religions. We have made up our own religions, because the spiritual need that there's a spiritual hunger that came out of modernism. I'm not actually quite sure how it's pronounced. Anyway, modernism. Anyway, there's a spiritual hunger because we are, as human beings, we do have a spiritual side, and that is not fulfilled simply by a preoccupation with reason, and so we seek spiritual things. But if you believe the Bible, you know that the only being that can satisfy spiritual needs, spiritual hunger, is God, as is revealed in the Bible. But nevertheless, our society has moved in that direction. What does all this have to do with what's happening in Ukraine and pandemic and all that kind of thing? Well, what that has to do is that our society is seeking saviors, right? Are seeking meaning, but we are no longer willing to think. Okay, we're no longer, So we've moved away. Our society always goes in the pendulum. So we've moved away from spirituality to pure reason, and now we're moved to this the primary thing about the new spirituality is emotions. So we're so preoccupied. Our society is preoccupied. The Western society is so preoccupied with feelings, with emotions, that we are so easily taken in by anything that tugs at the emotional heartstrings. And when you are, and unfortunately, emotions, being distracted by emotions is a very good way to not use your brain. What do I mean by this? What I mean by that is this. Okay, you look at social media. A lot of social media fights. Very easy to suddenly jump into personal argument, because the emotion is involved, and it is no longer about discussing or debating about topics rationally. That's no longer what's happening. So what does that have to do with in social media? You see a lot of virtue signaling. A lot of virtue signaling are posting pictures, in profile picture in Facebook, like the circle, framing, and or putting up the flag of Ukraine or whatever, and it's very easy for our society to be, I wouldn't say misled, but be herded into a pre-packaged and pre-made conclusions that have been pre-made and pre-packaged by other people, by people who are elites, media elites, government elites, academic elites, or whatever, because we're not willing to think for ourselves anymore. Once our emotional heartstrings are tugged, and it governs everything, and the thinking is done by other people, we no longer want to think anymore. We don't think critically. And this is why I think it's very important for us as believers, as Christians, to be able to think critically. Because even the Bible itself says, the Bereans were considered noble because they were actually engaged in questioning, in checking whether what Paul said were correct. What Paul said was correct. And that involves critical thinking. So God gave us the capacity to to think critically. It is actually living by the flesh to just go with where our emotions lead us, and not willing to use that capacity for thinking that God gives us. That brings me to the last point that I want to make. So I was looking at these pictures of these Ukrainians, and the Ukrainian government, as you might have heard, they were giving out weapons to the Ukrainian civilians, and they look very comfortable with weapons. They look very comfortable, and they look very used to it. They're even a grandmother, right? Like even I have seen a picture of a grandmother holding the weapons. And I have pretty strong reasons to believe that these pictures are recent. They're not from the past. And the mayor of Kiev, I think I said pronounce it the capital's name. Vladimir Klitschko. He was actually a world champion boxer. He said he's ready to fight. Everyone's ready to fight. And I have a hard time imagining this happening in the West, where the country is under attack, and the government says, "Okay, we're going to hand out weapons, and you fight." Okay, and they're okay, and a granny or just coming in and okay, here's my weapon. I'm going to be ready to fight invaders. And why am I having a hard time imagining this from the West? And the reason for that is because we have been so complacent, we have been so comfortable, we have been lulled to sleep. Bread and circuses, I like to use that term now. We have been so easily, sorry, I got an itchy nose here. We are easily lulled to sleep in the West by the comforts of our lifestyle. We got our Netflix. We don't have Netflix anymore. We have our streaming videos. We have information at our fingertips. We have this mind-numbing digital version or digital equivalent of crack cocaine called TikTok, which is really toxic. we have Twitter, we have all these social media, we have our preoccupation, we have celebrity news, we have all these things, and that takes away, even as spiritual people, as Christians, as followers of Christ, we know that these things can take away our attention from God, and I'm guilty as anyone else of that. But what this does is also it creates a soft society that is too comfortable. Now, I like to say, we have such a soft society, such a society that is so comfortable that a lot of us have to invent struggle, have to invent strife, have to invent problems. And the cultural Marxist streak of society and of some people in society makes it easier. It makes it very easy to do that because of course, I'm not going to go into this, but the cultural Marxism subsists on conflict. All right, but what if you have such a comfortable society where there's no actual really conflict? And this is where my folks, my tribe, academics come in. It's almost like some people in academia, their function, the whole preoccupation is just problematize. That's the word they like to use, to create conflict, to come up with conflict, not to create, but to come up with conflict, identify conflict, even if the common person, your normal everyday Joe and Jane, doesn't see any conflict. They see it there, microaggressions and that kind of thing. Okay, so they see it there because we are so comfortable. So what happens when you have a society that is so soft, and suddenly that we are faced with a very real possibility of an armed invasion, of an attack. Now in Australia, I asked my students this, but in Australia, and I asked my students, what would you do if we got attacked like people in Ukraine? In Australia, it seems very unlikely, but if you know the Bible, you know that nothing is impossible. You are seeing the signs. Rumors, you're seeing wars and rumors of wars. You're seeing plagues and diseases, earthquakes, disasters. We're seeing more and more of those. When I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, we thought that was it. No, there's even worse things now. So, so what happened to that society? What happened to that society that is so soft, that so comfortable, that those who want conflict have to make up their own conflict? What happened when we are faced with an actual real conflict that comes from outside? I don't have the answer for that. Do we take up arms? Do we do what the Ukrainians do? And as Christians especially, what do we do? All I can say is we do exactly the same thing as what we should have been doing all along, which is to do the will of God, what God wants us to do. And there is really, the circumstances will change, but maybe this crisis will be the jump start, will be the kick in the butt that we need as churches, and the church in the Western world that have been very comfortable, to finally join in the fight that our brothers and our sisters in Christ in places like China and in the Middle East have been doing all this time. That's it. It's been this video has been too long, so I'm going to leave it with that. Hopefully the next video won't be too much longer.